What's up, everybody? It's Sam Amico. Another edition of HoopsWire Live here on 330 to go. I, of course, am with hoopswire.com and 330 to go. And got a lot going on in the world of Cleveland sports, right? And guess what else is going on besides the Guardians and the nightmare that is the Cleveland Browns? The Cleveland Cavaliers begin playing real basketball next week that counts in the standings. The marathon that is the NBA season is back. And for the Cavs, you hope that marathon goes a little longer than a sprint. They went a full out 10-mile run into the playoffs and deep into the playoffs. And here we are. Wednesday, the Cavs open the season at Toronto. Seems like they're opening at Toronto or Brooklyn every year since LeBron left. Not sure why that is, but that's the case. And then they come home 2 nights later for the home opener a week from Friday, which I believe is the October 25th. And face old friend JB Bickerstaff and the Detroit Pistons. We just saw the Cavs play the Pistons, or some of you may have seen the Cavs play the Pistons a couple nights ago in Detroit in a preseason game. That's very different than the real thing. But I know there was a lot of handshakes and hugs with JB Bickerstaff before that game from the Cavaliers players. So always an exciting time here. We've got so much going on in terms of just the local sports scene in the 330 to go. I can't say 330 anymore without saying 330 to go. Somebody asked me my number the other day, and I said 330 to go, and then I gave them the rest of my number. They were like, "What?" So I apologize for that habit. Anyway, I think it's a good habit to get into, actually. But the Cavs right now seem to be set roster-wise. I mean, at least your top 12 guys, maybe even top 13. And they still got to figure out what to do at the bottom of the roster. I suspect that we'll have some more cuts coming up. They made a couple of changes this week, very minor at the end of the roster. And whenever I would post about the change, they signed Elijah Wood. They cut Jacob Gilyard. They cut Zaire Smith, who is a former first-round pick. I think he was drafted number 16 overall by the Sixers a few years ago. Blew out his knee and really right as soon as he started his rookie season right away and never really got a chance to develop into a real NBA player. Very good player for the Cleveland Charge, and all those names I listed that you probably don't know, they'll all be playing for the Charge. Zaire Smith, Jacob Gilyard, Elijah Hughes, who they just signed. But whenever I would post about those guys, whether they were cut or signed, inevitably every time somebody's first comment would be, "Who?" I'm like, well, you got to read the post to figure out who they are. Not going to just figure it out by the headline, which I understand. I try to decipher stories via the headline only. Anyway, so a couple of things. Number one, Cavs roster seems set. They seem set. They look comfortable playing together. The starters, Max Strus has only played 9 minutes of the preseason. He suffered a bruised hip, which they're just keeping him out for precautionary reasons. By all accounts, he'll be ready to go for the season opener. Has been practicing, just not playing in the preseason games. Same goes with Sam Merrill, has a little wrist soreness. Anytime anybody gets anything that's like, it's a little uncomfortable, then they're just like, yeah, we'll just practice and don't worry about that playing in the preseason game. So Strus and Merrill should be ready to go for the regular season opener, which is good. I don't know that I love, and I really like Caris LeVert coming off the Cavs bench. I don't know that I love him as a starter, just because I don't think he's a perfect fit. I almost would rather, even though I think LeVert's a better player, You'd almost rather have Dean Wade starting at that small forward spot. And you know what? I think that's something that the Cavs are going to think about here a little bit. I'm getting some vibes that they're going to be thinking about maybe going with Dean Wade in place of Max Strus. I don't think right off the bat, but perhaps at some point in that starting lineup. And why would they do that? Now, I think it would be a lot for them to actually go through with that change, but you have two dynamic guys in Garland, or obviously Donovan Mitchell, Darius Garland, a little more ball dominant. You're going to get the ball to Evan Mobley. That's the plan a lot more this season. By the way, Donovan Mitchell thinks that's a great idea. And if it means he's giving up some of his touches, he says he's totally on board with getting the ball more to Evan Mobley and wants to make that. He's fine with, so he says, fine with making that the focus of the offense, getting Evan Mobley to another level. Because then that opens things up for Mitchell and Garland. And then you've got Jarrett Allen, who, only takes 7-8 shots a game, but he makes 5 or 6 of them. I mean, so you're talking about a walking double-double. What would a guy like Dean Wade bring? Well, whereas Strus is 6'4", Wade is 6'10". Wade is a very solid defender. Wade doesn't need to do anything but take 2 or 3 shots a game. And if you put him in there with your starters, the other 4, the core 4, maybe he's a better fit than Max Strus. And guess what? If you bring Max Strus off the bench, now all of a sudden your bench has more firepower than if you're bringing Dean Wade off the bench, right? So I think at some point we need to prepare for that this season. Not right away, I don't think, but I do think that there's been thoughts of, and I'm just getting these vibes. Hey, would Dean Wade be kind of the answer there at the small forward spot as a starter? Now, that's getting way ahead of ourselves because that's not going to happen, I don't believe, right off the bat. It's just something to keep an eye on. Dean Wade, in order to do that, needs to continue to play defense like he did last season, which was fantastic on the wing. And, he was more of in terms of position, your position in the NBA is determined by what position you defend. So in that sense, Dean Wade was a small forward because he defended wings and he did a really good job of that. What he would need to do to become a starter in place of Max Strus is if he's shooting 3 or 4 times a game, he's got to knock down 2 or 3 of those. He's got to be shooting like 60% from the field. He's a perimeter shooter. He would stretch the floor. He's got to be knocking those down, which last year was, very iffy. Preseason was kind of iffy, but everybody's got preseason training camp legs and can't shoot. The other X factor to watch out for the Cavs this year, obviously being huge, is Ty Jerome. Cavs are really banking on him at 6'5" to give them size and ball handling in the backcourt that they didn't have last season. And Ty Jerome's a biggie. So, with good health, and Ty Jerome looked good against the Pistons. It seems like he's starting to get into a rhythm a little bit. So really, those are 2 guys that you really want to keep an eye on. Obviously, if you're talking about X factors this season, Caris LeVert, they're going to need a big season from him off the bench. Hopefully you don't have to start him too much. He's perfectly capable as a starter, don't get me wrong. It's just, this is all about fit. It's not about who's the better player. Because if you're talking about who's the better player, I might even put LeVert, probably would, above Strus. But Strus fits into the starting lineup better, and you need LeVert off the bench. You need that consistency. Now, I know some people are going to say, well, LeVert's not real consistent. But you need a guy who can fill it up and get you buckets off the bench. And that's what LeVert theoretically and ideally will bring to the team. So those are some things to keep an eye on. Isaac Okoro, obviously we know what the starters can bring. We heard, Darius Garland say this week, I'm ready for a bounce back season. The joy has returned in basketball, Darius Garland told Chris Fedor of Cleveland.com. I lost my joy last year because of, the injuries. I wasn't playing well and I just wasn't having fun. And he wasn't blaming JB Bickerstaff. That's not what I took out of that article. But he was just saying, I'm refreshed, I'm healthy with a new coach. And Darius Garland said, I hope to shut a lot of people up who doubted me. And that's really what professional athletes use as motivation, kind of what people are saying about them. And if that's the case, certainly Darius Garland is ready to roll in that sense in terms of having extra motivation this year. So, off the bench, Isaac Okoro that I was getting ready to talk about. I don't know what to expect from him. I don't know about his minutes. I think his minutes, if he doesn't produce, JB Bickerstaff would continuously throw Isaac Okoro out there regardless of how he was playing. I don't think that's the case this year. I think with Jaylon Tyson, the first round pick, the rookie, if Okoro falters and is inconsistent, then I think Tyson will be in there and getting his minutes almost right away. I don't think that, Isaac's on a quote unquote shorter leash this season. I think that in years past, as much as the Cavs love him and love his defense and like a lot of things about him, I think that he needs, and Isaac Okoro will tell you this, he's got to knock down those shots. He's got to be comfortable shooting the basketball. He can't just be a guy who, is hesitant to take the three and drives. It's good to do that. It's good to fake the three and drive, but you've got to be confident and comfortable at this stage of your career to be able to knock down those shots, or you're going to lose minutes. So, to me, the biggest X factors. It's good that I don't have to talk on this show because clearly I can't do it today. The biggest X factors to me going into this season, which starts next week, is Ty Jerome, Dean Wade, and Isaac Okoro. What are we going to get from them if you're the Cavs? Those are the three big questions. And don't be surprised if this doesn't all come together and look great right away. Kenny Atkinson has said, new coach, new system. Sure, it looks good in the preseason, but there are things and kinks that we need to work out to get through. And, this first month of the season might look a little bit like the preseason, like we're still figuring things out, because you kind of are, and you're still getting back into that groove as players. If you remember, Jarrett Allen missed the end of last season, the last, 7 playoff games. Donovan Mitchell missed the last few. Caris LeVert missed a couple in there. Dean Wade missed a ton of time at the end of the year. Ty Jerome missed the whole year. So I know I'm probably forgetting somebody, but you've got to, these things are going to take it's going to take a minute, I suspect. Now, before I go any further, let me take a sip of coffee because you thought I was long-winded before, just wait. All right, that makes good television right there. Guys drinking on the air. So what we really need to watch out for this year. Here is the thing to me that if you're a diehard NBA fan, this is what you're really going to love. There's 82 regular season games. Every game matters this year. It's like the NFL. Every game matters. You play once a week, you got to get that win. The NBA, every game matters. All 82 games matter. If you lose at home to the Portland Trailblazers in November, as the Cavaliers did last year, that's going to come back to bite you, because this race in the Eastern Conference is going to be so tight that, whoever finishes second in the East may only finish a game over who finishes third. And whoever finishes third maybe a game over who finishes fourth, and so on down the line. And, you might as well start with first place. I think it's going to be that tight that if you lose one of these games that you're supposed to win at home in October, November, early December, you may look back and say, man, if we had gotten that game, we would be the number 2 seed in the East playing a play-in tournament team in the first round instead of this tough 3-6 matchup. There really may only be 3 games, 3 wins separating the number 3 seed in the East and the number 6 or 7 seed in the East. I mean, it is going to be that tight. It was last year. It was the year before that. What makes you think it won't be this year? I think everybody looks to have improved. So, somebody asked me, can the Cavs be contenders? Yes, absolutely, they can. I know people are like, what? They have the same team they had last year. They couldn't get out of the second round. Well, they would have gotten out of the second round last year if they'd been on the Pacers side of the bracket. We'd be saying, well, the Cavs made it to the Eastern Conference Finals last year, just like the Pacers. No offense to Indiana, credit to them, but they took advantage of opponent injuries, played well, but, they played the Knicks in Game 7, and the Knicks dropped like flies, all their healthy players. Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle was out, OG Anunoby, everybody fell, and the Pacers blew them out of the gym in Game 7 in the second round of the playoffs. If the Cavs have had that matchup, I believe they would have won that game and advanced to the Eastern Conference Finals. So, I think that there's a lot in terms of we didn't appreciate what the Cavs did last year. That first round against Orlando Magic, that was a nightmare. Should have never gone 7 games. Shouldn't have gone more than 5. After the first 2 games of the playoffs, when the Cavs played Orlando in Cleveland and dominated those first 2 games, it showed that they were by far the superior team. The fact that went 7 games was a big moral loss. So we know that about the Cavs. Okay. Now, there's coaching change. As I've said, Kenny Atkinson comes with an edge. It's pretty clear that he's not going to. You're going to get the hook. Let's put it this way: if you're a player, you're going to get the hook if you're not performing. That's just the Kenny Atkinson way. Caris LeVert and Jarrett Allen, who have played for Kenny Atkinson before, have both said, oh, yeah, he'll let you know when you're messing up. And, talking to Kenny Atkinson at the press conferences and media day, very friendly, pretty personable. But, yeah, there's an edge there. And I think that's kind of what this team needed to kind of push it to another level. Obviously, that's what the Cavs thought, which is why they made the coaching change. So I think that's something. The one thing I like about Kenny Atkinson, and I've shared this before, I'm not sure on what outlet. I've got like 3 or 4 things going, so forgive me if it was here. But the one thing I like about Kenny Atkinson is he didn't just blow smoke on media day or when talking to reporters. His message is, guess what? We're going to go through hard times this season. There's going to be, obstacles. There's going to be maybe those streaks where you lose 4 out of 6. You're on the road. You're not playing well. You're tired. He's like, that stuff's going to happen, which is what I like about it, Kenny Atkinson. He's been around the NBA forever. He knows how this works. The Golden State Warriors, he was an assistant coach there in 2022. They won the championship. I know that team had Steph Curry, but I think that this Cavs team's a lot like that team because that team was not dominant on their way to the title. Didn't have Kevin Durant anymore. Draymond Green was starting his downward slide. Klay Thompson definitely took a big hit. Was not the Klay Thompson that we had seen before and disliked so much as Cavs fans. But that was a team, Jordan Poole was probably their second best player that year. He's now with the Wizards. But that was a team that went through a lot of highs and lows, a lot of lows. And Kenny Atkinson has said, we're going through that this year. A lot of coaches will say, oh, I'm so excited and I think we're going to have a great season. And Kenny Atkinson has said that. He's been very positive, but he's also been very honest. And that honesty is, that storm is coming. So here's the key. How do you come out of that on the other side? It happens to every team, every NBA season. Nobody goes 82-0. Only one team ever has gone 73-9, and we're not going to mention them. Actually, we can, because that team blew a 3-1 lead in the finals. But that's the key. Kenny Atkinson has said, how do we come through those rough times on the other side? He said, and Kenny Atkinson said, from what I've seen in the past couple of years, Cavs didn't do a great job of that. They played their best basketball before the All-Star break, and then something happened, an injury or something, and they never recovered. They never got fully back to the way, and that is, what he wants them to do. He has stressed, look, this team has not played its best basketball after the All-Star break. It's played its best basketball. This group has played its best basketball before the All-Star break. And that doesn't mean a whole lot. So that's the thing I like about Kenny Atkinson. He's just going to tell you like it is. He's not going to sugarcoat things and try to sound good in the press. It is, here's the way it's going to go. Here's what needs to happen when it goes that way. And it hasn't happened previously. Those are all things Kenny Atkinson said. So, that's the key. That, as you watch this team, know that it's number one. It's going to take a little bit of time, I think. Now, when I say a little bit of time, I don't mean to winning games. I mean being as sharp as it should be. You've got to win games. You can't say, well, we're still learning on the flight. No, there's none of that. This is a team that brought everybody back so that they would be more experienced and feel more comfortable on the floor than their opponents. So that means wins. I'm talking about actual sharpness. They may not be as sharp as they need to be at the beginning of the season, with the goal that we're going to be at our absolute most sharpest at the end of the year. So that's what we're looking at with the Cavaliers. I don't have any great stories this week. I didn't run into Tristan Thompson in the locker room this week because the Cavs have been playing their preseason games on the road. They have one more left if you're watching this live. That would be Friday night at Chicago. And I believe that starts exactly the same time. That meaningless preseason exhibition scrimmage Cavs game in Chicago, I believe, starts at the exact time of the Cleveland Guardians Yankees game. So this is probably one game that the Cavs beat reporter / supposed alleged insider will not be watching. I might, maybe during the commercial. Come on. Preseason basketball or Cleveland Guardians must-win playoff game in the American League Championship Series. I think that the choice is going to be pretty easy. Plus, I'll be stuck watching the Browns again on Sunday. Don't get me started on them. Don't let me get started on them. That's a whole other show. It really is. Don't bother Sam during Browns games. No, don't. Now I'm always very mad. Very, very mad about the Browns when I sit there. And people are like, my family's like, you're really going to let that put you in a bad mood? You know what? I said the great thing now is I'm apathetic. They're 1-5 going into the weekend. They keep running Deshaun Watson out there who can't really throw. He has no timing with his receivers. The locker room doesn't seem great. I'm not putting that all on Watson, but he's part of it. Joe Flacco was the quarterback last season. The locker room was great. The spirits were high. The offensive line was injured then too. Amari Cooper was playing great then too. David Njoku was an all-pro with Joe Flacco. And it's not even just Joe Flacco. This team was A lot better. Forget Baker Mayfield, who's probably the best quarterback in the NFL right now. I know I'm going off on a tangent, but I got to let loose. But Jacoby Brissett was better than what we're seeing. There's just much more organization. I won't even say Baker because I thought Baker was kind of a loose cannon. But there's just much more organization with Jacoby Brissett and especially Joe Flacco. Just professionals. And I'm not saying that, look, I don't know anything about Deshaun Watson other than what I've seen him play. So I can't say he's lacking professionalism. I don't want that message to come across. But, I'm a fan just like everybody else when it comes to Browns. Never covered a game. Never been to the stadium as anything more than a fan. Never been there as a media member. Because whenever I comment on the Browns, like on social media, people are like, well, really good journalistic take. And I'm like, I cover the Cavs in the NBA. So when it comes to the Browns and the Guardians and high school football and college football, I'm just a fan. I'm allowed to be a fan in those areas, so I celebrate it. So my opinion here on the Browns is nothing more but coming from a fan. But someone whose heart is actually orange with a brown stripe on it. Brown and white, sorry. Anyway, back to the Cavaliers before I get too mad. Hey, guess what? I've got another show coming to, I believe, television. That's what I've been told. This season. And guess who is on it with me? It's not going to be just me sitting here like some doofus like I do every week by myself. But it seems like you kind of watch anyway. So the new show, I'm not going to give too many details about it this week. Next week I will. I will tell you, however, that it's going to be on television and it's going to co-star somebody much better looking than me. I know it's you probably cannot picture that, but there is someone out there, a better basketball player than me, which is also probably hard to believe. Has more hair than me, not clinging to scraps. And what else could I tell you about him? You probably know him. He's a former Cavalier, and he's also taller than me, which is actually not hard to be. Daniel Boobie Gibson. And Rafa, who does the CAVS Spanish language broadcasts, and us, the three of us, will be bringing you a Cavaliers regular show. I don't know if it starts next week. I gotta find that out. All I know is I'm like, I'm one of the main guys. I'll be there every week, and Boobie will be there most weeks. So, I will give you the show details next week after I get a few more things nailed down. We're still kind of, I believe, naming the show. So there are a few more things and air times and channel and stuff like that. Probably be able to guess the channel, but I'm not going to say it right now because I haven't been given clearance to even bring it up this much, other than I'll be doing a show with Boobie Gibson and it'll air on television. So that's very exciting. I'm very much looking forward to that. Probably be able to promote some 330 to go on there. In fact, I'm sure I will, whether I'm allowed or not. And I'm sure they wouldn't have a problem with it because it's my show. So just like this is my show. Okay, the Cavaliers. Actually, this is Steve, the producer's show. He just lets me on. He's debating whether I should be on the show or we should just have the microphone and the wall. And he's debating which one would be more exciting. But anyway, back to the Cavs. I think that, usually this time run up 30 minutes, but so I don't want to go too much longer, but I think at this time of year, everybody's like, where do you think the Cavs will finish in the East? Listen, if they're healthy, I think that they could finish second in the East. I don't think they're going to be better than Boston. I know that the Knicks went out and got Karl Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges. I know that the Sixers have Joel Embiid, Tyrese Maxey, and added Paul George and a bunch of other really good veterans. I know and appreciate the Milwaukee Bucks may get their act together with Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo. Not in that order. Giannis is how he goes is how that team goes. I think the Bucks are getting a little bit over the hill, though, aside from Giannis. The Orlando Magic were an up-and-coming team last year. They look to be improved. They're going to be very difficult to keep, behind. If you're the Cavs, keep them back behind you so that you have home court advantage if you face them in the playoffs. I also think, look, the Indiana Pacers, even though I kind of downplayed their run to the Eastern Conference Finals, they could win the Central Division. I mean, they really could. They've got a ton of talent there, too. The Miami Heat, people are writing them off. I would not do that. Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero all stay healthy. They've got a big three there. Now, it's not a magical big three, but they've got two all-stars in that lineup. And Hero, if he ever stays healthy, is a potential all-star. So, I mean, right there, guys, is 7 teams. Okay? Let me tell you something. Any one of those 7 teams could finish second behind Boston in the Eastern Conference. Any one of them. If you told me any one of those 7 teams, finished first in the Eastern Conference, I'd be like, oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Now, I think if the Cavs finished with number 1 seed in the East, I'd be surprised. Same thing with Orlando Magic, Indiana Pacers, Miami Heat. Any of those others, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, Boston, and New York, if any of them finish with the number 1 seed, I'd be like, yeah, all right. But that means if one of those 4 finishes with the number 1, then somebody else got finished 2, 3, and 4. And guess what that means? 1 through 4 is when you have home court advantage in the playoffs. 5, 6, you're the road team in the first round of the playoffs, and pretty much throughout the rest of the playoffs. 7, 8, you're in the play-in tournament. So that's why I'm telling you every game is so important and so vital. Even these Tuesday night games in February against the Charlotte Hornets that nobody but myself and maybe one of my kids is watching. Matters. I know, that's this season. So where do I think the Cavs will finish? I don't think they'll finish second in the East. I think if I look at everything, I think they'll finish 3rd or 4th, but I think it's going to be really, really tight. And 3rd is shooting high. 4th, you've got to hold off. If you're finishing 4th, that means you're finishing above either the Knicks, Philly, Boston. Who else am I missing in there? Knicks, Philly, Boston, or Milwaukee, which I think the Cavs could be 4th ahead of Milwaukee. I think they could be 3rd ahead of Philly if Embiid and George are, like they have been lately. They're getting older. They're breaking down a little bit. I'm not wishing injury on anybody. I'm just basing this on history that those 2 guys could be injured. And I think that there's a lot to be said for familiarity with the Cavs. So, there's a lot, before we get to where they finish and where they place, there's so much basketball to be played. There's so many things that have to happen that, all teams are figuring out. Kind of the early season is an extension of the preseason. People are like, yeah, I don't care about basketball till December. Well, the teams usually don't, they know you're playing the long game, but you still want to be good at the beginning of the year because this race is going to be so tight. So anyway, I've talked way too long, and which is not a surprise. Ask anybody in my family. They'll be like, my gosh, that was a lot of talking. And you really didn't make any kind of point. So that may be where we are. I'm looking over at my phone because there's some news here. But anyway, we'll be back next week with a regular season game under the belt. One game at Toronto. And then that night at home, JB Bickerstaff and the Detroit Pistons, who I also think will be better and maybe battle even for a play-in spot, not just because of JB, but for other reasons. So, very excited to be bringing you Cavs coverage during the actual Cavs season. Excited that you join, excited that you follow along, and we will talk to you next week. Thanks again. Talk to you then.